William shocks everyone as he strips Camilla's family of their home. Lawyers discover bombshell. Imagine standing in a room where 15 years of carefully crafted promises evaporate in less than 90 seconds because someone brought the wrong leather folder to a routine estate meeting. That is precisely what happened when Prince William walked into the records room at Ravensmere, laid 3 antique keys on a polished mahogany table, and handed Queen Camilla's legal team a document that effectively rendered every single occupancy agreement, custom renovation, and private reassurance completely worthless. The silence that followed was not just awkward. It was the sound of a multi-million-dollar family legacy collapsing under the weight of a single 1999 signature that everyone in the room had conveniently forgotten existed. For over a decade, the Parker Bowles family operated under the absolute certainty that this 12,000-acre estate was their permanent sanctuary, complete with customized residential suites, private wine cellars, and long-term security arrangements paid for right under the nose of estate trustees. But when William sat down alongside 2 senior estate solicitors and delivered a stone-cold 7-word verdict, he did not just block a property transfer, he executed one of the most ruthless legal checkmates in modern royal history. How did a private arrangement quietly backed by King Charles himself unravel in a single morning, leaving Camilla's inner circle scrambling for answers while the moving vans were turned away at the main gates? Before we dive into the exact paperwork that triggered this unprecedented showdown, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into royal power plays. The atmosphere inside the estate office at Ravensmere during the early morning hours was less like a standard property review, and much more like a carefully orchestrated legal ambush. The Parker Bowles family had arrived under the impression that they were attending a straightforward administrative check in regarding the ongoing structural updates to the main house and surrounding cottages. For over 15 years, the understanding surrounding this 12,000-acre estate had been treated as absolute fact within their immediate circle. It was not merely a grand retreat. It was an established family hub where rooms had been customized, private living arrangements had been mapped out, and long-term occupancy plans were well underway. Key members of the family had spent years treating the estate as an unquestioned inheritance, guided by decades of private assurances, informal conversations, and the steady quiet backing of King Charles. But the dynamic shifted entirely the moment Prince William arrived without the typical royal convoy or advanced security team, stepping directly into the old estate office where historical land documents and legal records have been housed for generations. Sitting beside 2 estate solicitors carrying thick legal briefs, William bypasses the pleasantries entirely, opening a faded leather binder bearing a distinct royal crest from 1999. The contents of that folder were not up for debate or negotiation. They contained a rigid legal opinion detailing the precise terms under which the property was originally established and maintained. As the lead solicitor began reading the core provisions of the governing trust, it became instantly clear that the foundational premise upon which Camilla's family had built their long-term plans was fundamentally flawed. The estate was governed by a strict bloodline succession mechanism established decades prior, explicitly barring any non-lineal relatives, stepchildren, or secondary family members from acquiring permanent title, beneficial interest, or long-term residential rights. The room descended into an uncomfortable silence as the full weight of the document hit the table. The private assurances that had felt so solid for over a decade suddenly held no legal standing whatsoever against a binding historical document bearing signatures that could not be overridden by personal preference or informal royal consent. To understand how a confrontation of this magnitude unfolded behind closed doors, one has to examine the years of quiet assumptions and financial decisions that led up to this moment. Following the formal integration of Queen Camilla into the royal household, the management of secondary estates and private residences often blurred the lines between official crown assets and personal family accommodations. For years, Ravensmere had operated in a gray zone of soft privileges. Contractors were brought in to perform extensive property surveys, specialized interior designers were commissioned to alter residential wings, and dedicated funds were allocated to maintain private quarters specifically designated for members of the Parker Bowles family. To the outside world, these adjustments looked like standard estate upkeep, but internal records revealed a deliberate and steady transformation of the property into a long-term personal compound. Custom architectural blueprints had been drawn up to convert historical nursery corridors into independent living apartments, complete with modernized security systems, private access roads, and climate-controlled storage facilities. High-level staff members on the property had long been instructed to treat these arrangements as permanent, accommodating personal schedules, private events, and family gatherings without checking through the primary estate management channels. This gradual expansion went largely unchallenged for years, primarily because King Charles had consistently reinforced the idea that the estate would remain a permanent sanctuary for his extended family. The phrase that echoed through private family discussions for nearly 2 decades was a simple promise that the property would always remain available to them. Based on that ongoing pledge, substantial personal and estate resources were invested into making the residence fit their exact specifications. However, while informal promises were being made in private drawing rooms, the underlying legal framework governing the land remained entirely unchanged, sitting silently in the royal archives waiting for someone to. The tension escalated dramatically when Prince William assumed a more active and direct role in overseeing the duchy and various family trust accounts. Unlike previous years where estate management was handled through distant middle management and passive oversight, William initiated a comprehensive review of all property holdings, lease structures, and financial outlays connected to secondary royal residences. It was during this routine financial audit that red flags began to appear regarding the allocations made toward Ravensmere. Detailed line items revealed thousands of pounds being drawn from estate maintenance funds for non-essential residential modifications, private interior customizations, and advanced structural surveys that had never received formal approval from the primary estate trustees. When William began pulling the historical deeds and trust agreements associated with the land, he uncovered the binding 1999 covenant signed by the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret. That document was specifically crafted during a period of structural reorganization within the family's private landholdings to ensure that core historical properties could never be carved up, leased out long-term, or transferred outside the direct line of monarchical succession. The language of the covenant was absolute and unambiguous, explicitly prohibiting the creation of long-term tenancies, beneficial trusts, or life interests. The immediate reaction within the room was a mix of quiet disbelief and rising frustration as the reality of the situation set in. Representatives for the Parker Bowles family attempted to argue that decades of established occupancy, coupled with significant financial commitments and verbal guarantees from the monarch, should carry weight in determining a practical compromise. They raised the possibility of establishing a long-term lease arrangement, a nominal 99-year agreement that would preserve the technical ownership within the trust, while allowing the family to retain physical possession of their customized quarters. But the legal team quickly shut down that avenue, pointing directly to a specific clause within the 1999 covenant that required unanimous approval from all active trustees for any lease extending beyond 21 years. As a primary trustee, William had already formally recorded his rejection of any such workaround weeks before the meeting even took place. Every potential legal loophole, structural loophole, or administrative alternative that had been quietly drafted by inner circle advisors was systematically dismantled line by line. The realization that there was no legal recourse, no room for arbitration, and no authority higher than the governing trust document created an immediate operational crisis. Orders were issued on the spot to halt all ongoing construction work, freeze pending vendor contracts, and audit every recent transaction connected to the property's residential account. The sense of absolute certainty that had governed the family's relationship with the estate for 15 years was erased in a matter of minutes, leaving them to face the immediate logistics of packing up years of personal belongings and vacating a property they had long considered their permanent home. As the formal session concluded, the operational fallout began almost instantly across the entire estate grounds. Staff members who had spent the morning preparing the main residence for upcoming family visits were quietly instructed to stand down and revert the rooms to their baseline historical configurations. Custom nameplates, specialized interior furnishings, and personal items that had been installed in the private suites were systematically logged and prepared for removal. The quiet efficiency with which the estate management executed these changes highlighted the absolute finality of the decision. There were no public statements, no dramatic press releases, and no formal announcements broadcast to the media. The entire operation was handled with the cold, methodical precision characteristic of high-level royal asset management. For King Charles, the ripples from this confrontation quickly extended beyond the immediate boundaries of Ravensmere, creating widespread speculation among court insiders and estate officials who had long observed the growing divide over family property management. For years, secondary royals and extended family members had operated under a relatively relaxed system of property allocation, where historic homes were passed down or repurposed based on internal family agreements rather than strict legal audits. William's decisive action at Ravensmere signaled a complete departure from this traditional approach, establishing a new precedent where legal compliance, financial transparency, and strict adherence to historical trust mandates take absolute priority over personal relationships. As news of the meeting filtered through senior administrative channels, it became clear that this was not an isolated dispute over a single estate, but rather the first major move in abroad. With the legal mandate firmly established and the Parker Bowles family's occupancy rights completely dissolved, the focus shifted to the immediate future of the 12,000-acre property itself. Rather than absorbing the estate back into his own personal portfolio or claiming the vast residence for his immediate family, Prince William executed a strategic move that caught nearly everyone involved off guard. Instead of retaining the property for private royal use, plans were put into motion to redirect the estate's substantial resources, working farms and residential cottages toward broader public and charitable initiatives. The decision to completely divest the primary residence from private family control served a dual purpose. It permanently closed the door on any future attempts to reclaim the space for personal use, while simultaneously neutralizing any potential public criticism regarding property hoarding among senior royals. The estate's substantial annual revenues, this dramatic restructuring of Ravensmere's governance highlighted the profound shift in power and strategic planning currently taking place behind the scenes of the royal institution. The methodical unraveling of a 15-year informal agreement proved that long-standing traditions and private royal promises could be completely dismantled when challenged by precise legal documentation and uncompromising trustee oversight. As the physical clear-out of the manor house reached its final stages, the contrast between the old way of managing family assets and the new business-minded approach became starkly evident. The era of handshakes, verbal assurances, and unwritten property rights had officially come to an end, replaced by an unyielding commitment to legal authority and institutional preservation that leaves zero room for personal compromise or legacy favors. The immediate fallout of that morning's legal revelation reverberated far beyond the quiet mahogany-lined walls of the estate office, sending shockwaves through every corridor of the royal administrative apparatus. Within hours of the meeting's abrupt conclusion, the atmosphere across the grounds shifted from routine maintenance to an urgent, methodical audit of every asset connected to the property. Specialized legal teams retained by the duchy began cross-referencing decades of property records, procurement orders, and architectural modifications to ensure total compliance with the newly enforced 1999 covenant. What they uncovered was a sprawling web of private arrangements that had operated under the radar for nearly 2 decades. Invoices for high-end interior design work, private security. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was described by court insiders as unprecedentedly tense. King Charles found himself caught in an impossible position, trapped between the solemn personal promises he had made to his wife's family and the unyielding legal boundaries enforced by his eldest son. For years, Charles had managed institutional friction through diplomacy, quiet compromise, and the sheer authority of his position. But the rigid framework of the 1999 trust left zero room for managerial maneuvering. The document did not merely offer a legal opinion. It stripped the monarch of any unilateral power to alter the estate's succession, effectively rendering his previous commitments legally null and void. Camilla, deeply unnerved by the sudden efficiency of the legal maneuver, recognized that this was not simply a dispute over a single historic home. It was a clear, calculated demonstration of how institutional power would be exercised moving forward. The realization that an old leather folder hidden in the archives could instantly dismantle 15 years of planned domestic security triggered a rapid reassessment of all other family property agreements, as legal advisors scrambled to check whether similar bloodline clauses governed other secondary royal residences across the realm. As the financial audit expanded, the logistical process of clearing the Parker Bowles family out of Ravensmere began in earnest. Moving vans bearing nondescript commercial logos arrived at the estate's side gates under strict orders to execute the clear-out quietly and without fanfare. High-value antiques, custom furnishings, and personal collections that had been brought onto the property over the years were carefully cataloged, packed, and loaded for transport. Staff members who had worked at the manor house for years expressed quiet astonishment at the sheer speed of the transformation. Rooms that had been carefully tailored to the exact tastes of secondary family members were stripped down to their original architectural bones within 48 hours. The brass nameplates that had been fixed to the doors of the private residential suites were unscrewed and replaced with standard historical room numbers. Even the personal wine collection that had been built up in the climate-controlled cellars was logged as estate property, subject to immediate inventory checks. The physical erasure of the family's presence was so thorough that by the end of the week, virtually no trace remained of the luxury compound they had spent 15 years building under the assumption of permanent ownership. While the physical clear-out was underway, a parallel battle was taking place behind closed doors regarding public relations and strategic narrative control. Palace press officers were put on high alert, desperate to prevent details of the high-stakes legal ambush from leaking to the press. A public exposure of this scale, detailing how the king had promised away property he did not legally own, only to be shut down by his own heir, threatened to inflict catastrophic damage on the public standing of the monarchy. Official channels prepared tight, sanitized talking points framing any changes at Ravensmere as part of a routine, long-planned structural reorganization aimed at streamlining crown assets for public benefit. However, the tension between the private reality and the public narrative was palpable. Senior courtiers walked a tightrope, attempting to maintain an aura of absolute unity, while managing the severe internal friction between the sovereign's private household and the duchy's legal team. Every draft release was scrutinized to ensure that not a single word hinted at the bitter legal confrontation that had taken place inside the old estate office. The broader implications of William's decisive action began to settle in among extended members of the royal family, many of whom had long enjoyed informal property privileges across various crown estates. For decades, the allocation of historic cottages, hunting lodges, and country manors had operated under a system of unspoken favoritism, where proximity to the monarch dictated access to valuable real estate. William's strict enforcement of the 1999 bloodline covenant effectively signaled the total collapse of this informal favor economy. Secondary royals who had assumed their residential leases were secure suddenly found themselves facing rigorous legal scrutiny from trust attorneys auditing long-term occupancy agreements. The message sent by the Ravensmere intervention was unmistakable. Historical trust covenants would be enforced to the exact letter of the law, without exception for personal relationships, informal guarantees, or royal status. The long-standing culture of administrative leniency was officially over, replaced by a cold corporate approach to asset management that prioritized institutional preservation above all else. Behind the scenes, the legal team representing the Parker Bowles family explored every possible avenue to challenge the enforcement of the 1999 amendment, only to hit wall after wall. Independent property attorneys brought in to review the certified documents confirmed the absolute validity of the original terms. The signature of the Queen Mother, paired with that of Princess Margaret and Charles's own written acknowledgement from November 1999, created an ironclad legal chain that no contemporary court or administrative body could break. The strategic brilliance of the original architects became increasingly apparent to everyone involved. The two royal women had anticipated precisely how future family dynamics might threaten the integrity of core estates, and they had crafted a multi-layered legal trap that blocked every conceivable workaround, from direct transfers and long-term trusts to 99-year nominal leases. With every legal avenue thoroughly blocked, the family's legal representatives had no choice but to advise their clients to accept the outcome and stand down completely, avoiding a public legal battle that would only result in further institutional humiliation. As the last of the moving vehicles departed the grounds of Ravensmere, the focus shifted entirely to the permanent reallocation of the 12,000-acre property. Prince William's refusal to absorb the massive estate into his own personal portfolio or hold it for his immediate family's private use proved to be the ultimate strategic masterstroke. By surrendering his personal claim to the residence, he completely detached his actions from any accusation of personal greed or petty family rivalry. The property was instead placed into a newly structured charitable trust dedicated to serving wounded military veterans, emergency first responders, and young people transitioning out of the care system. The estate's vast agricultural revenues were earmarked to fund long-term vocational training programs and medical recovery facilities, turning a property that had once been the focal point of private entitlement into a beacon of public service. The decision effectively locked the estate behind a public mandate, ensuring that no future monarch or private individual could ever attempt to repurpose the land for personal family accommodations again. The sudden transformation of Ravensmere from an exclusive private retreat into a public charitable asset created a stark, permanent contrast that would weigh heavily on the royal family's internal dynamics for years to come. Every time members of the public, veteran families, or charitable organizers passed through the gates of the estate, it served as a quiet, unspoken reminder of the legal battle that had taken place behind its doors. The custom wine cellars, the renovated residential suites, and the pristine agricultural lands now served individuals who had sacrificed for the nation, rather than secondary family members who had built their plans on unverified promises. For King Charles, the outcome was a deeply sobering lesson in the limits of royal authority in the modern era, demonstrating that the ultimate power within the institution no longer rested on personal decrees or private handshakes, but on the precise, unyielding language of legal documents written decades before. With the estate's new charter finalized and the immediate operational crisis resolved, the long-term strategic map of the monarchy took on a completely different shape. The execution of the Ravensmere audit proved that Prince William was fully prepared to exercise ruthless legal authority to safeguard the future of the crown's assets, even when it meant directly confronting the reign of his own father. The era of sentimental management had officially drawn to a close, replaced by an era defined by legal precision, public accountability, and structural discipline. As the final legal seals were applied to the new trust documents, one fundamental truth remained crystal clear. The past had reasserted itself with absolute authority, and the structural integrity of the institution had been defended by a legal mechanism that had waited quietly in a faded leather folder for 27 years to fulfill its purpose. The administrative shift that followed the sealing of the new Ravensmere trust documents did not remain confined to a single estate. It initiated a complete structural overhaul across the entire network of private royal holdings. Financial auditors and property lawyers, acting under direct instructions from the primary trustees, began conducting unannounced compliance reviews of every secondary residence, agricultural lease, and grace and favor accommodation tied to the crown. The precedent set at Ravensmere had established a clear template. No historical trust agreement would be ignored, no informal occupancy arrangement would be grandfathered in, and every single pound of institutional money spent on property upkeep would require explicit, documented authorization from the Board of Trustees. Across the wider estate network, long-standing tenancies that had operated for decades on verbal understandings were suddenly subjected to rigorous legal audits, forcing occupants to provide formal documentation proving their legal right to reside on the land. This systemic tightening of estate governance caused massive friction within the broader royal circle, as extended family members realized that the era of passive oversight had permanently ended. For generations, secondary figures had relied on the quiet generosity of the reigning monarch to secure prime real estate, private hunting rights, and subsidized living quarters without ever facing public or legal scrutiny. But with Prince William strictly enforcing trust compliance and bloodline covenants, those long-held privileges dissolved almost overnight. Legal teams representing various distant relatives spent weeks reviewing old land grants and family settlements, desperately searching for clauses that might protect their current residential arrangements. In almost every case, they discovered that the historical documents favored institutional preservation over personal occupancy, leaving them with no choice but to adjust to the new, unyielding reality of absolute legal compliance. Inside the palace, the long-term strategic implications of the Ravensmere showdown began to take shape as the new charitable foundation officially took control of the property. The conversion of the 12,000-acre estate into a dedicated haven for wounded military veterans and families in crisis moved forward with remarkable speed and precision. Architectural plans that had once been drawn up to convert historical nursery corridors into luxury private apartments were completely discarded, replaced by blueprints designed to accommodate medical equipment, therapy spaces, and accessible family living quarters. The speed with which the estate was repurposed served as a constant, visible reminder of the fundamental shift in priorities. Where private wealth and personal comfort had once been quietly arranged behind closed doors, Public utility and transparent governance now took absolute precedence, completely blocking any attempt to rewrite the narrative surrounding the property's sudden change in management. For Queen Camilla and her immediate family, the public and private aftermath of the legal checkmate proved deeply challenging to navigate. Although official press channels maintained a strict curtain of silence, avoiding any public mention of the confrontation inside the old estate office, the reality of their complete exclusion from Ravensmere was impossible to hide from court insiders and high society circles. Social arrangements, long-planned family gatherings, and seasonal retreats that had been scheduled to take place at the estate were abruptly cancelled or relocated to minor private properties. The sudden, absolute disappearance of the Parker Bowles family from the estate's operational life created an undeniable elephant in the room, silently highlighting the strict legal boundaries that separated the reigning monarch's personal wishes from the permanent, unyielding laws of the institution itself. The dynamic between King Charles and Prince William underwent a profound, permanent transformation in the wake of the estate audit. While the monarch had spent decades operating under a traditional model of personal authority and diplomatic compromise, William's actions demonstrated a modern corporate approach to managing the monarchy's vast assets. By relying strictly on cold legal documentation, precise trust frameworks, and public-facing accountability, William proved that the future governance of the crown would not be dictated by personal sentiment, family promises, or off-the-books agreements. The confrontation over the 1999 covenant established an unwritten rule for the current reign. The long-term preservation of the institution's integrity and public standing would always override the personal preferences of the sovereign, no matter how deeply held those preferences might be. As the physical work at Ravensmere neared completion, the estate's vast agricultural operations began generating their first formal revenues under the new trust structure. Hundreds of thousands of pounds derived from tenant farming, commercial timber harvesting, and land management were routed directly into independent bank accounts managed by the charitable board. Not a single penny entered the private coffers of any royal family member, permanently sealing the financial wall that William had built around the property. The decision to completely divest from any personal financial or residential benefit effectively silenced critics who had long accused senior royals of using historic trusts as private wealth vehicles. The estate became a masterclass in strategic asset reallocation, proving that a property once embroiled in intense private friction could be transformed into a powerful instrument of public goodwill. The legacy of the two royal women who had signed the original 1999 amendment, the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret, cast a long, enduring shadow over the entire episode. Historians and legal experts who studied the structure of the covenant marveled at the extraordinary foresight embedded within its text. Decades before the current family dynamics had even fully materialized, those two senior royals had recognized the inherent vulnerabilities of private estate settlements and had crafted a bulletproof legal mechanism to protect the core bloodline assets of the monarchy. They had anticipated every potential legal loophole, every informal workaround, and every administrative pressure point that a future monarch might face, ensuring that when the critical moment arrived, the paperwork alone would be sufficient to defend the historic integrity of the land without requiring a public or political battle. Ultimately, the resolution of the Ravensmere dispute marked the definitive close of one chapter in royal history and the opening of another. The ancient estate, with its Jacobean manor house, pristine lakes, and working farms, no longer stood as a symbol of internal family negotiation or quiet favoritism. It stood as an active, functional testament to the power of rigid legal governance